Good news, car fans. Hyundai hasn't forgotten about you in its march towards an electrified future, as evidenced by this, the 2023 Hyundai Ioniq 6. Now this is the fourth model on the shared eGMP platform, but the first that isn't an SUV. Hyundai has taken a dramatically different approach from the much-loved Ioniq 5, with a smooth, streamlined body and lower weight, making for a much longer range car. We're here in pretty British Columbia to see how it differentiates itself from the family and also that dominant T-badge model in the segment. Let's go for a drive. Now, for those of you who might have just sneered at the idea that rainy Vancouver is pretty, you know what I have for you? Bam! B-roll with me driving around Vancouver. The Ioniq 6 is definitely not a sedanified Ioniq 5. Hyundai's new four-door takes a much more smoother design approach, with a super low-profile front end complete with adaptive vents down in front. It kinda looks like the straight face emoji. The simple headlight design features amber DRLs too. Maybe Hyundai felt bad for Telluride fans, right? It does keep those divisive flush-fitting door handles, which are sure to frustrate in very cold climates. They also mess up the clean flanks when the car is on, but as I learned while taking pictures, they'll go back in with a bit of pressure. The back end is, well, pretty busy, what with the big spoiler attached to the rear glass and the multiple conflicting shut lines. It's here where the Ioniq design language is strongest though, a full-width taillight setup consisting of no less than 68 LED parametric pixels in each row. Is it pretty? I mean, that's up to each person, but I think it's distinctive and, much like the 5, unlike anything else currently on the road. It's deceptively large too. The 6 looks like a compact, but it's less than 2 inches stubbier than a Sonata, with a 4-inch longer wheelbase. The Ioniq 6 interior is chock full of clever, thoughtful design touches. So you know that pixel pattern that's all over the place outside the car? Well, it's all over the place inside the car too. You've got it right here on the steering wheel, which lights up and actually changes color when you shift from reverse to drive. Just a nice, thoughtful touch to keep you reminded. The Ioniq 6 interior is not just a carbon copy of its SUV sibling either. It does have a pretty unique interior with a different steering wheel, a different center console. Actually, it has a locked in place dedicated center console. No more sliding action like the Ioniq 5. I'm not entirely sure about these winged parts on the extremity of the dashboard, but beyond that, it's cool, it's funky, there's a whole bunch of textures. One thing I should note about those little dashboard wings, other markets feature screens there with video feeds in place of traditional side mirrors. However, that sort of thing just doesn't fly here in North America. Pop quiz. What does the Ioniq 6 and a Jeep Wrangler have in common? No, I can't actually take the roof off or all the doors, but all of the window switches are in the center of the car. They're not over on the door panels, which is a unique touch. In fact, almost nothing is on the door panels outside of my memory seat button and of course the door handles. This is a really nice touch in the Ioniq 6 interior because having nothing on the door does make it more likely that I'm just going to rest my arm here. And guess what? It's pretty comfortable because it's this nice gentle curve the whole way. One thing I will say personally, a bit of a miss for the Ioniq 6 is just this regular sunroof up here. I kind of love the full-length glass roof that you can get in other EVs. That being said, had Hyundai stuck a full glass roof in here, we might have had less headroom in the back. So let's talk about those back seats. Well, there's a ton of legroom, like a lot of legroom. Headroom is kind of the limiting factor in the Ioniq 6. That should not be surprising, as you can see the shape of the vehicle. But that being said, it's a minor drawback in a car that is so stylish and eye-catching. You sit fairly high up in the Ioniq 6. It's a bit of a surprise the first time you get into the interior. But I realize that it's sort of necessary so that I can see where the front of the car really lies. Things I don't necessarily love about the Ioniq 6 interior. So I mentioned it earlier, there isn't a ton of headroom that is expected in a vehicle that is so low and shaped so much with aerodynamics in mind. But as you can see, yep, I would be brushing the headliner if this sunroof wasn't open. I'm also still not really sold on Hyundai's column-mounted shifter. It's fine, it gets the job done, but it can be a little ungainly to deal with. Okay, so let's talk about how the Ioniq 6 drives. Underneath the skin, it is not really any different from the Ioniq 5. You've got the same 77.4 kilowatt hour battery pack. You've got the same single motor rear drive or dual motor all-wheel drive setup. In that sense, no real surprises. However, this different body style with lower weight and a lower center of gravity does make the Ioniq 6 both more engaging to drive and more refined on the road. So the Ioniq 5 can sometimes be just a little bit too firm, but this is really refined, really mature riding. It feels like a luxury car in that sense. But there are some windy roads on this test route, and the Ioniq 6 holds its own. It's a lot of fun, again, because low center of gravity, instant access power. You've got 320 horsepower here in the top all-wheel drive model, and that is more than enough. 0 to 60 is probably in the very low 5-second range, if not quicker. However, if you want the headline super long range system, then that means you're going to have to go with the single motor 225 horsepower setup. All right, so we're talking about range, so let's get those range numbers out there. Officially, the Ioniq 6 is rated up to 361 miles in rear drive form. For Canadians, that's 581 kilometers. That's of course with the 18-inch alloy wheels. Now if you move to the all-wheel drive setup but keep the 18s, you're still looking at a little over 300 miles or 509 kilometers of range. Then you end up with the top trim, which is this model right here with the 20-inch alloys, and that does knock off a fair amount of range, so you'd end up looking at 435 kilometers or 270 miles. I really enjoy how the Ioniq 6 moves on the road though. It's very smooth, it's composed, it's calm, and it really makes you feel good while driving because of this calmness. I'm not ever feeling like I need to rush or, panic. That little beep you just heard was me switching to iPedal, which is Hyundai's term for one-pedal driving. It is the maximum level of 5 different levels of regenerative braking. At this top level, it will do about a quarter G's worth of deceleration when you're at higher speeds. And what I really enjoy about iPedal is that it's a pretty easy system to learn and recalibrate your own movements to adjust for. So I was using it for most of the day, and it makes for pretty smooth progress, even in this stop-and-go kind of traffic. Of course, this being a modern Hyundai EV, you get all manner of driving assists. That includes the latest version of Highway Driving Assist, which has machine learning capability, so it will pick up on your habits and drive based on them. If you keep a very short distance from cars in front of you, and you're pretty quick on the uptake when cars start moving, eventually it'll learn to do pretty much the same thing as you. Not exactly, according to Hyundai itself, but, it won't just be a one-size-fits-all kind of experience. Another thing that the Ioniq 6 borrows from its sibling is this dual 12.3-inch screen setup. Okay, actually it doesn't. It's not the same. You know why? This one has a black surround. The Ioniq 5's is white. Bam, different. These screens are very configurable, they're easy to read, they're pretty quick in terms of response time. I think the important thing here is just it's very user-friendly. It's very easy to get comfortable behind the Ioniq 6, even though there are a lot of features. It's a pretty familiar tech suite if you spent any time at all in Ioniq 5. There's a head-up display, which will give you directions if you're using the native navigation. It'll also show you when any cars pop up in your blind spot with a nice little warning. What I really enjoy in the Ioniq 6 is that Hyundai hasn't completely eliminated actual physical buttons. So there is this row of buttons down in the lower dashboard, tied to main menus in the touchscreen for easier access. You've also got a volume knob. The climate controls are touch controls, which aren't great, but at least they're fairly spaced out, so it's unlikely you're gonna, hit the wrong thing. That being said, you will get smudges pretty much everywhere. There's actually no piano black anywhere in this car. It's a welcome surprise. I will say, though, that the matte black plastic that is in the center of the center console isn't great. It just looks a little low rent, and that's only because the rest of the materials in this car are pretty impressive. For the people who aren't satisfied with this near silent approach, you can always set up a few different piped in sound effects if you're just really missing engine noise of some sort. Alright, so I have just set up the active sound design for the largest change. Let's see what that actually means. Okay, yeah, that's something. This is, of course, a sound that has been available in Ioniq 5 as well, but, oh my. Yep, that is definitely active and sound and design. Let's just turn that off now. There we go. All right, so we're nearing the end of the day with the Ioniq 6, and let's talk about efficiency. I've driven just a hair over 233 kilometers, and I have 175 kilometers remaining. The battery is at 42%. We started with a full battery, and it was telling us 431 kilometers of range. Overall, then, we've lost around 25 kilometers over what the estimate was at the beginning of the day. It's worth pointing out, however, that the Vancouver area is very hilly. It's obviously been raining. It hasn't been an ideal place for ultimate range testing, and yet the Ioniq 6 has done pretty darn well, pretty close to its official numbers. Pricing for the Ioniq 6 is pretty aggressive. American buyers will see an SE standard range model with a smaller battery pack and just 149 horsepower for $42,715. The Range Champ rear drive model with 225 horsepower begins from $46,615, while spring-in for all-wheel drive and 320 horsepower will cost US buyers just a hair over $50,000, including destination. This top-end tester is the equivalent of the US Limited, which rings in at $57,215. Canada has a simpler lineup. The Preferred is the equivalent of the SE Long Range in the US and retails for $56,924, including destination. Next up is the all-wheel drive model for an additional $3,000. At the top is the Ultimate Package, which is the equivalent of the US Limited, at $65,924. Strangely, that makes the 6 slightly more affordable than the 5 in the US, but pricier in Canada. The 2023 Hyundai Ioniq 6 is another standout EV star from the Korean brand. It's fresh, it's fun, it's refined, and it has that camel-like range that only a streamlined shape can provide. For those people who are looking for a genuine EV car, it belongs on everyone's shortlist.